Hello, my amazing children. This is Grandma Carla, and I am back with more of Pippi Longstocking. And today we're reading Pippi Longstocking, Chapter 2. Pippi is a thing searcher and ends up in a fight. Annika woke early the next morning. She quickly hopped out of bed and tiptoed over to Tommy. "Wake up, Tommy," she said, shaking him by the arm. "Wake up. Let's go over and see that funny girl with the big shoes." Tommy was instantly wide awake. "When I was lying here asleep, I knew something fun was going to happen today, even though I couldn't remember what it was," he said as he pulled off his pajama top. Then they both headed for the bathroom. They brushed their teeth and washed much faster than usual. They threw on their clothes, and a whole hour earlier than their mother expected, they came sliding down the banister. They landed right at the breakfast table, where they sat down and began shouting that they wanted their hot cocoa at once. "What's going on?" asked their mother. "Why are you in such a hurry?" "We're going over to see the new girl in the house next door," said Tommy. "We might stay there all day," said Annika. On that particular morning, Pippi was in the middle of baking ginger snaps. She had made a huge batch of dough, and she rolled it out on the kitchen floor. My goodness. There's Pippi rolling out her ginger snaps on the kitchen floor. "Because you know what?" said Pippi to her little monkey. "What good is it to roll the dough on a table when you're going to bake at least 500 ginger snaps?" So there she lay on the floor, cutting out heart-shaped ginger snaps for dear life. "Stop walking in the dough, Mr. Nelson," she said, sounding annoyed just as the doorbell rang. Pippi jumped up to open the door. She was as white as a miller from head to toe, and when she eagerly shook hands with Tommy and Annika, a whole cloud of flour descended upon them. "How nice of you to drop in," she said, shaking out her apron and making another cloud of flour. Tommy and Annika got so much flour in their throats that they had to cough. "What are you doing?" asked Tommy. "Well, if I told you that I'm cleaning the chimney, I'm sure you wouldn't believe me, since you're as sharp as a tack," said Pippi. "The fact is that I'm baking, but I'll be finished soon. You can sit on the firebox to wait." Pippi could certainly work fast. Tommy and Annika sat down on the firebox to watch. She rolled out the ginger snap dough, she tossed cookies onto the baking sheets, and she flung the baking sheets into the oven. They thought it was almost like watching a film. "Done," said Pippi finally, as she slammed the oven door on the last baking sheet with a bang. "What should we do now?" said Tommy. "I don't know what you've got in mind," said Pippi, "but I'm not the sort to lie around. I'm a thing searcher, you see, and that means I never have a moment to spare." "What did you say you were?" asked Annika. "A thing searcher." "What's that?" asked Tommy. "Someone who goes searching for things, of course. What else would it be?" said Pippi as she swept all of the flour on the floor into a little pile. "The whole world is full of things, which means there's a real need for someone to go searching for them, and that's exactly what a thing searcher does." "What kind of things?" asked Annika. "Oh, all kinds," said Pippi. "Gold nuggets and ostrich feathers and dead mice and tiny little nuts and bolts and things like that." Tommy and Annika thought it sounded like it might be fun, and they wanted to be thing searchers too, even though Tommy said that he hoped he would find a gold nugget and not just a tiny little bolt. "We'll have to wait and see what turns up," said Pippi. "I always find something. But now we'd better hurry before some other thing searchers show up and make off with all of the gold nuggets around here." All three thing searchers set off. They thought it would be best to search through around the nearby houses, because Pippi said that even though it was possible to find little nuts and bolts deep in the woods, the best things were almost always found where people lived. "Although, for that matter," she said, "I've also seen examples of the opposite. I remember one time when I was out searching for things in the jungles of Borneo. There, right in the middle of a primeval forest where no human being had ever set foot, what do you think I find? A nice wooden leg. Later, I gave it away to an old man with only one leg, and he said that all the money in the world couldn't buy a wooden leg like that." Tommy and Annika watched Pippi to see how a thing searcher was supposed to act. Pippi ran from one side of the road to the other, shading her eyes with her hand as she searched and searched. Sometimes she would crawl on her knees, stick her hand between the slats of a fence, and then say with disappointment, "How strange! I was sure I saw a gold nugget." "Can we really take anything we find?" asked Annika. "Yes, anything lying on the ground," said Pippi. Some distance away, an old man was lying on the grass outside the house, sleeping. "That man over there is lying on the ground," said Pippi, "and we find him, so let's take him." Tommy and Annika were both a little startled. "Oh no, Pippi, we can't take an old man. We just can't," said Tommy. "Besides, what would we do with him?" "What would we do with him? There are plenty of things we could do. We could put him in a little rabbit cage instead of a rabbit and feed him dandelion leaves. But if you don't want to, that's fine with me, even though I think it's annoying that some other thing searcher might come along and nab him." They kept on going. Suddenly Pippi gave a loud roar. "Well, I've certainly never seen anything like this," she shouted, and she picked up a big, rusty can from the grass. What a find! What a real find! You can never have too many cans. Tommy looked at the can rather suspiciously and said, "What can you use it for?" "Oh, you can use this for plenty of things," said Pippi. "For instance, you could put cookies inside it. Then it becomes a nice can with cookies. Or you can not put cookies inside it. Then it becomes a can without cookies. Of course, that's not nearly as nice, but it's still a good thing." She inspected the can, which certainly was very rusty. It had a hole in the bottom. "It looks like this must be a can without cookies," she said, giving it some thought. "But you can also put it over your head and pretend it's the middle of the night." And that's what she did. With the can over her head, she wandered through the neighborhood like some sort of a tin tower, and she didn't stop until she tripped over a wire fence and landed flat on her stomach. There was a huge bang when she hit the ground. "So there you see," said Pippi, taking off the can. "If I hadn't had this on, I would have landed flat on my face and really hurt myself." "Yes, but if you hadn't had it on," said Annika, "you never would have tripped over the wire fence." But before she had even finished speaking, Pippi gave out another roar and triumphantly held up an empty spool of thread. "This seems to be my lucky day," she said. "Such a sweet, sweet little spool for blowing soap bubbles. Or you could put it on a string and wear it like a necklace. I'm going to go home and do that right now." Can't seem to turn the page. There we go. At that very moment, the gate of a nearby house flew open and a boy came rushing out. He looked scared, which wasn't so strange because right on his heel were 5 other boys. They soon caught him, and then they shoved him up against a fence, where they all attacked him. All 5 of them started hitting and punching him. He began to cry, and he held up his arms to shield his face. "Go to it, boys," yelled the biggest and strongest of the lot. "That way he'll never dare to show his face on this street again." "Oh," said Annika, "that's Willie they're beating up. How can they be so mean?" "It's that horrible Binkt. He's always fighting," said Tommy. "But 5 against 1. What cowards!" Pippi went over to the boys and tapped Binkt on the back with her hand. "Hey there," she said. "Are you planning to make mincemeat out of little Willie here, since all 5 of you are going at him at once?" Binkt turned around and caught sight of a girl that he had never seen before. A complete stranger who dared to poke him. At first he merely stared at her out of sheer astonishment, but then a big sneer appeared on his face. "Boys," he said, "boys, forget about Willie and take a look at this girl. What a weird little girl she is." He slapped his knees and started laughing. In a flash, they were all crowded around Pippi, all except for Willie, who wiped away his tears and timidly went over to stand next to Tommy. "Look at that hair of hers, bright as fire, and those shoes," Binkt went on. "Could I borrow one of them? I really want to go out rowing, but I don't have a boat." Then he grabbed one of Pippi's braids, but dropped it instantly and said, "Ow, I burned myself." And then all 5 of the boys who were standing around Pippi started jumping and shouting, "Flare hair! Flare hair!" Pippi stood in the middle of the circle and smiled in a friendly way. Binkt was hoping that she would get mad or start to cry. At the very least, she should look scared. But when nothing else seemed to work, he gave her a shove. "I don't think you have a very nice way of treating ladies," said Pippi, and then she lifted him up in her strong arms high up in the air. She carried him over to a birch tree that stood nearby and slung him over a branch. Then she picked up the second boy and hung him over another branch, and she took the next one and set him on top of a gate post outside a house. The next one she tossed over a fence so that he ended up sitting in a flower bed in a nearby garden, and the last of the bullies she put in a tiny little toy wagon that was standing on the road. Then Pippi and Tommy and Annika and Willie all stood there for a moment looking at the boys, who were speechless with surprise. Pippi said, "What cowards you are. It takes all 5 of you to attack one boy. How cowardly. And then you start shoving around a defenseless little girl too. That's really awful." To Tommy and Annika she said, "Come on, let's go home." And to Willie she said, "Just come and tell me if they ever try to beat you up again." To Binkt, who was perched up in the tree and didn't dare move, she said, "If you have anything else to say about my hair or my shoes, it'd be best if you told me now, before I go home." But Binkt had nothing more to say about Pippi's shoes or about her hair either. Then Pippi picked up the can in one hand and then the spool in the other and went on her way, followed by Tommy and Annika. When they reached Pippi's garden, Pippi said, "Oh dear, how annoying. Here I found 2 such fine things and you have found nothing. You'll have to search a little harder, Tommy. Why don't you look inside that old tree? Old trees are some of the best places for a thing searcher to look." Tommy said that he didn't think he and Annika were ever going to find anything, but to please Pippi, he stuck his hand into the hollow of a trunk tree. "Wait a minute," he said in astonishment. He pulled out his hand, and in it he was holding a truly splendid notebook with a leather cover. In a special holder was a little silver pin. "Now that's really strange," said Tommy. "You see," said Pippi, "there's nothing as great as being a thing searcher. It's odd that more people don't take up the profession. They all want to be carpenters or shoemakers and chimney sweeps and stuff like that. But thing searchers, no thank you, that's not good enough for them." And then she looked at Annika. "Why don't you go and feel around inside that old stump?" There are almost always things to be found inside old stumps. Annika stuck her hand inside, and almost at once she found a red coral necklace. Then she and Tommy just stood there gaping for a long time. They were so surprised, and they thought that from now on they were going to be thing searchers every single day. Pippi had been up half the night playing catch, and now she suddenly felt sleepy. "I think I'd better go and lie down for a while," she said. "Why don't you come along and tuck me in?" When Pippi sat down on the edge of her bed and took off her shoes, she thought for a moment, and then she said, "That Binkt said that he was going out rowing. Phooey!" She snickered scornfully. "I'll teach him to row. Yes, I will. Just wait until next time." "Tell me, Pippi," said Tommy in a respectful tone of voice, "why do you have such big shoes?" "So I can wiggle my toes, of course," she replied. And then she lay down to sleep. She always slept with her feet on the pillow and her head under the covers. "They sleep like this in Guatemala," she assured them. "It's the only proper way to sleep, and this way I can wiggle my toes while I'm sleeping too." "Can you fall asleep without a lullaby?" she went on. "Can you fall asleep without a lullaby?" she went on. "I always have to sing myself for a while. Otherwise I can't sleep a wink all night." Tommy and Annika listened to the humming sound coming from under the covers. Pippi was singing herself to sleep. Carefully and quietly they tiptoed out of the room so as not to disturb her. In the doorway they turned around and they cast one last glance at the bed. They could see nothing but Pippi's feet resting on the pillow. There she lay, briskly wiggling her toes. Then Tommy and Annika ran home. Annika was clutching her coral necklace tightly in her hand. "Well, that was really very odd," she said. "Tommy, you don't think that Pippi put these things there beforehand, do you?" "You never know," said Tommy. "You never really know anything when it comes to Pippi Longstocking. And that is the end of that chapter. And here's a picture of Pippi's feet. As she's sleeping, she puts her feet on the pillow and then she puts her head underneath the covers. And here is a picture of Bengt up in the tree. You can't see his face, but you can certainly see his legs as she set him up in a tree against his will. And I think those are all the pictures. I'm looking real quickly to make sure we got all of the pictures for this chapter, and it looks like we did. This is Grandma Carla, and I love you.